First, the Israeli army has today announced the opening of an additional aid crossing into the Gaza Strip ahead of an American deadline that could see some military assistance to Israel cut. Hours before the deadline, though, 8 international organisations issued a statement saying Israel had failed to meet the US target, adding that conditions are worse than at any point during the 13-month war. Last week, a UN-backed assessment concluded that famine is imminent in parts of northern Gaza, where Israel has imposed a siege. Caris Garland has our first report.
Crowding around a food distribution site in Deir al-Balah, scores of Palestinians seek to stave off the hunger that's become so widespread. Humanitarian conditions in the Gaza Strip remain dire, and on Tuesday, 8 international aid organizations said that Israel had missed a US deadline to reduce human suffering in the territory. The US sent Israel a letter on October 13, warning it had 30 days to take a list of steps to improve the situation or risk losing American military support. On Monday, Israel's new foreign minister appeared to downplay the deadline.
We see how we can respond in difficult circumstances to the humanitarian demands. I'm sure that we can also reach understanding with our American friends.
According to the aid organizations, Israel showed partial or inconsistent implementation on 4 of the American demands and non-compliance, delays or backtracking on 15 of them. One key demand was to increase the amount of aid trucks entering Gaza. The UN said an average of 37 trucks passed into the Strip per day in October. That's compared to roughly 200 per day in the 2 previous months. But barely any of this made it to northern Gaza, where Israel launched a major offensive weeks ago. The Israeli military says it's fighting Hamas militants who have regrouped in the north. Rights groups and observers have accused Israel of trying to implement a plan in which the army forcibly displaces the population from the area. In its letter to Israel, the US had asked for written commitment that the military was not seeking to isolate northern Gaza.
Well, a bit earlier on today, I spoke to Noga Tarnopolsky. She's our correspondent in Jerusalem. And I asked her to tell me a bit more about Israel's perspective on aid access to Gaza. Here's what she told me.
The latest statements are not really denying the suffering of Gazans, but they do dispute the claim of starvation. So the Israeli army said in the last hour in a statement that 125 humanitarian trucks entered Gaza today from 2 previously opened border crossings. So that's not counting the new border crossing that was opened today, where I think they said another 39 trucks came in. And the Israeli army also says that of all of those trucks, only the UN and other agencies only came to pick up 26 of them. And they say that 900, the contents of 900 trucks are stockpiled on the Gazan side of the border. There's no explanation as to why this might be, but the army does seem to be blaming the international agencies for not properly distributing all of this aid.
Well, I'm very pleased to welcome live to the programme now Louise Wateridge from the UN Palestinian agency UNRWA. She's live for us in Nuseirat in the centre of Gaza. Louise, first of all, thank you very much indeed for finding the time to talk to us today.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to put to you a little bit of what our Jerusalem correspondent just recounted that the Israeli army is saying today, that some aid is getting into Gaza, Israel says. Specifically, 125 trucks have crossed today. But only Israel is saying the contents of a few of them have been picked up. Israel claiming hundreds of trucks are stuck on the Gazan side of the border. Is that true?
I mean, we certainly welcome this amount of aid, any amount of aid reaching the borders of the Gaza Strip. This is something that has not been reliable and not been consistent for the last 13 months. But it's not just the aid getting to the border. That's not where the operation stops. The aid needs to reach the people in need. And in order to do that, we simply cannot always access and facilitate the aid at the borders if we don't have safe passage. What I mean by safe passage is we cannot go to a border and collect aid if we're being bombed, if we're being shot at, if there's strikes, and also if our missions are denied. Since September, we've had over 100% increase in our missions on the ground, our movements on the ground denied. So if we're not permitted to move, if we're not permitted to go and collect the aid, and if we don't have ensured safety for our personnel, no, we cannot collect it. Yeah. But I will remind you, October, we saw an average of 37 trucks a day. So as I say, I welcome any increase. We welcome any increase to these supplies. But this is not the reality that we have seen throughout this war, that there has been enough aid reaching people in the Gaza Strip.
And we will talk about what you're seeing in just a moment. But just to clarify what it is that you are saying, your understanding is that there is some aid on the Gazan side of the frontier at the moment, but really it is too dangerous, or Israel has made it too logistically difficult for your staff to go and get it.
Firstly, I have no knowledge. We do not have access to the border to see this aid. This is something that you're telling me is there, but we don't have access to go and collect the aid. And sometimes on occasion when we do, it is too dangerous for the movements to be permitted. We have had multiple incidences where the convoys carrying the aid that we have been in have been shot at, have been fired upon. I have been in one of these convoys myself, and it's simply not possible to distribute aid to the population when we ourselves are under fire. So it's as I say, we welcome the aid to the border, but we need the safe facilitation from the border to the people who need the aid. Otherwise, no, it simply cannot be distributed.
And help us, Louise, get a picture of what's happening a little further north from where you are, places like Jabalia, places like Beit Lahia. We've been reporting that they are effectively under Israeli siege for weeks now, that a trickle of aid is getting in, although, as I say, Israel says some of it is getting in today. What's your best understanding of what is happening right now in places like that?
For an entire month, the humanitarians have been denied entry by Israeli authorities to these besieged areas. Only recently, in the last week, have we had very limited access on the ground. Journalists are also denied entry from this area. So the information we receive is very limited. But what I can tell you from our colleagues on the ground, from displaced people we're communicating with, is people are trapped. People are trapped in residential buildings. They're hiding from the ongoing military operations around them. They're running out of food. The water wells, UNRWA has 8 water wells in Jabalia. They have all been destroyed. So people do not have access to water. It's horror show. It's an absolute horror show. The stories that we are hearing from people, I spoke to some people in Gaza City last week who had fled Jabalia. They were telling us of bodies on the street. Hospitals do not have ambulances functioning. People are not able to get to hospital. People injured. The only method to get to a hospital there is by donkey cart. One surgeon is remaining in the besieged north. It's just endless. I don't have enough time to tell you the horrors that are going on in the besieged areas of the Gaza Strip in the north.
And in terms of, food, Louise, there was this UN-backed assessment last week saying famine is now imminent in parts of northern Gaza. I wonder if that tallies with your experience and the experience of your colleagues who you're able to speak to who are a little further north.
Across the Gaza Strip, everybody right now is hungry. We're seeing, even in the middle and southern areas at our distribution centers, people are fighting over bags of flour. It's just appalling the conditions people are living in. And as I said, the besieged north, that has been cut off from humanitarian aid for a month. No food has reached for an entire month. People are starving, and when we have access, we will know more about these horrors. But yes, this IPC report is based on the lack of access, the lack of aid, the lack of supplies able to reach people, the lack of absolutely everything. People have been malnourished here for the best part of 13 months. This isn't something that's happened over the last days, even the last siege since October. It's been 13 months that people have not had access to nourishment, to food, to consistent shelter, to water. And it's had a huge effect on the population here.
And look, you are now in Nuseirat, in the center of Gaza. Yesterday, we were reporting that Palestinians in Nuseirat were saying that Israeli tanks had entered a part of the refugee camp there. Given that you're in Nuseirat yourself, I mean, what can you just tell us about what the situation is like there in terms of security, if nothing else?
10 minutes didn't pass yesterday without a bomb, a strike, or shelling. It was, when I say relentless, I mean every 10 minutes we were hearing bombing and strikes in the surrounding areas. It's terrifying. People around us here, everybody that we can see is in makeshift shelters. They're not even in structures. They're sheltering behind fabric. There's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. When these bombardments start, when these military operations start, where do they go? There's nowhere to flee. We've been saying again for 13 months. Nowhere is safe in the Gaza Strip, and that is the case yesterday. Many people lost their lives. Many civilians lost their lives. And this is the daily occurrence here. It's not just yesterday. Every day we wake up in this war, we check to see if our colleagues and our friends are alive. That's the first thing everybody here does. It just never ends.
And look, you've already reminded us that you've travelled to Gaza already during this war. You said that you were in a convoy that was shot at previously. I just wonder, you can give us such a human face to a story that can be so hard to tell sometimes. Is it your impression that what you're seeing now in Gaza is worse, somehow more dangerous than what you've seen previously?
Since I've been in the Gaza Strip from April, it has gotten worse every day. Some days it gets worse every hour. It's never improved. The situation is not improving. The bombing is more ferocious. The food is more scarce. The weather is getting worse and there's no shelter. We have trucks of mattresses and blankets waiting and tarps for people to shelter in, waiting to enter the Gaza Strip that have been sat there for 6 months. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. It's a population of 2.2 million people who need everything. It's logistically not the most difficult operation the United Nations has faced, but the political will involved is what's preventing the people getting everything that they need. And we see it here. It's unbearable. The suffering that people are forced to go through on a daily basis. They've lost everything. They've lost their homes. They've lost their families. They've lost siblings, children. It is just unbearable, and it never ends. The suffering is not ending. It's not getting easier. And we're very scared for what is to come with the winter months, with disease spreading, with the ongoing bombardments. We need a ceasefire now. We need the hostages to go home to their families. And we really need people in Gaza Strip, all civilians, to have respite from this significantly brutal and unprecedented war.
Well, Louise Wateridge, thank you very much indeed for taking a little bit of time to tell us what you've seen in Gaza. We really appreciate it. That's Louise Wateridge talking to us from UNRWA, the UN Palestinian agency. She was live for us in Nuseirat, in the center of Gaza.